Hi guys, Darren from MRT here. In this video we're going to be looking at advanced schedules, running some trains on my full and log railway, so I hope you enjoy it. Let's get started. If you're a first time viewer, make sure you subscribe and hit the little bell icon to be notified of my upcoming videos, and make sure you like and share. Also follow us on Facebook, and please have a look at my new website www.modelrailroadtechniques.com. Hi, Darren from MRT here. Why for the funny hat? My daughter, thanks Moo. She dared me for my first experience on YouTube on video to wear the Mickey Mouse ears with a conductor's hat. So thanks Moo. Just let me get rid of that and I'll just put another hat on because you don't need to see my messy hair. Alright, this next series of videos, what I'm going to look at doing is doing a tour of my layout, which is the full and log railway. Right here we're next to Barham, which is the first scenic part of my layout. You probably see some trains that might be running here in the background. That's all running on TrainController. So what I'm going to look at doing is I'm going to run these two trains on schedules, and I'm going to show you how they work and interact within TrainController. Alright, so the first two schedules I'm going to show, they run from this track here in Barham, which is the third track, and what they do, they're basically like a shuttle service between the township of Barham here, and also there's another township of Lower Mincham, which is a bigger station over there. So they run two trains and they just intersect with each other, and they just they're like a shuttle service that will go indefinitely. So what I'm going to do, I'll pick the camera up and I'll actually trace how the train actually goes from point A to point B, and then I'll go through TrainController and what I did to achieve these results. Alright, as you can see, this little rail car here is just setting off on its journey. It'll transverse over the bridges through here on its way through to the town of Lower Mincham. So with there, it'll meet up with the other train, Victorian Railways rail car, and just keep going backwards and forwards like that. Okay, the first thing we're going to look at is my central control panel. As you can see, this is the main control panel with the main yard, sort of the biggest station we got here, Lower Mincham. And so the schedules we're looking at are coming between Barham and Lower Mincham to Barham, so just toggling between those two. Okay, so what we ended up doing is the dispatcher on my layout doesn't really need to
control points, signals, because that's all done by the system. So what we ended up doing is simplifying it right down so there was just buttons and various other elements to show what trains are doing at any given time. So what I'm going to do, we're going to be working with Railcar 1. So I'll just go across what all these icons and all that mean, and then we'll start by defining a schedule within TrainController. So the first element here is just a free text of what telling me what the actual schedule and railcar is. So these here, next one, are extended accessories, or EA as we call them. They start any given schedule. So this particular one with the arrow pointing to the right hand side of the screen, so that's start railcar number 1 out. So that's out of BS3, which it's railcar number 1's home block, to LMS7. And the next icon across, or EA here, is the one pointing back to the left, is to start the schedule for railcar 1 in return. So this little icon here is a little bit unique. So what we got that for, if that's turned on, what the system will actually do, and I'll show you how to do this later in the video, is it'll toggle between these two schedules. So okay, so if we're starting with this here, and it illuminates green if it's on, and I'll just show you quickly. What we'll do, I'll actually start the schedule and show you how it interacts. So first button here, as I said, is the outgoing start button. Now we'll quickly move across to some of these other icons. Now, as I just explained what this one's about, this BS3, what that actually is, that's a variable, so that's definitely for another video. So what we can look at it at a glance, as it goes from block to block to block, you can see railcar 1 is currently in BS3, and it'll toggle through as it goes through various blocks. Now this here is another visual indicator, just to say, okay, we can just run down the line. That I know is a flagman that turns green when I know the active, or the schedule is active. Now this little set of icons here is quite cool. So what we actually did with particularly the automatic rail cars and automatic services, they stop and start quite regularly as they transverse through their different stations. Now currently the little green person means that train is currently waiting at the station for a predetermined time to collect its passengers before the schedule will start, or the actual train will start moving. So the next one is if we've got that little icon there, so that's waiting for a new schedule. So what that actually means is, so when the train starts in BS3 and finishes in LMS7 and finishes, so this red light will go off. So if this icon here is on, what it'll actually do, this little predetermined clock will come up, and it'll just tell that, okay, it's not stopped for any other reason, but it's just waiting for it to go on to its next schedule. So it's a little bit of an indicator to say, yep, that train is still running. We're just waiting for it to start another schedule. Now you'll see these other ones here, which is the red exclamation mark. So that's a bit of an error message that we've got here right now that we can bring up. So that means it's not on a schedule and not on its home block. So what that means is it's currently, so a good example is Railcar 2 here. It's currently in BS2, which is not actually a part of one of its blocks, and it's not on a schedule. So it's going to come up with that error. So this next little icon next to it is like our upside down wine glass, is our almost like an emergency kill switch regarding that schedule. So we can turn that schedule off and it stops the train in its tracks. Next one here is it's a counter. So when the schedule goes all the way through and finishes and goes through its finish operations, which I'll show you later, it'll increment up one. So where that's really handy is after an operating session, I can have a quick look and diagnostic to see how many times that schedule has actually run, because these two schedules 1 and 2 sort of run in tandem with each other from each side of the layout effectively, and if one has got disproportionate amount of schedules towards the other one, it's quite evident that there's possibly something wrong with one of those schedules. So that's just a quick little breakdown on our central control panel. Okay, the first thing we're going to look at is actually making the basic schedule. So how do we do that? So the easiest way I look at doing that, I go into the dispatch panel, which brings up this, obviously now a blank screen. Then you'll notice a little A icon here, which actually means auto train, and so that brings up the little interface for that. So you can see we're in Alpine division. So what I'll do, I will go to the Northern division, because that's the location of the schedules where we want to start them. So the schedule I'm going to have a look at defining today is going to go from LMS 7 to BS3. So this is the Lower Mitcham station to the Barham station. So what you do, you go and click the left mouse button on the first block that you want to start. Now you'll notice that this little interface here lights up. So there's a whole lot of arrows and other icons across the top here. So they refer to the direction of travel. So if we're going to be traveling to the left of the screen, we need a start block. So the arrow with the green arrow to the left is a start block. So each schedule needs a start and a finish block. So then we transverse through. Okay, I now know that this schedule needs to finish at BS3. So it also needs a stop block. So the little triangle, the little rectangle, I should say, with the orange to the left hand side is the finish block. Now what we need to do is go into the system to get it to pick the best route through. So the way to do that is using the little binoculars here, and it goes and searches for a few seconds. And now you can see we've got a highlighted line here. So that's the route that TrainController has chosen. Now you can go into and change these routes from if it's a more complicated schedule. Okay, from here what we need to look at doing is saving the schedule. So you can see this little icon here, which is like the little floppy disk that is highlighted there. Now you also see up here that an auto train has popped into the schedules list here in the dispatch panel. So to see what happens when I actually click off that, see how it disappears up in this location here. So we'll click it back on. So what that actually means is that particular schedule is now saved. So there's probably not much more for this basic start and finish for us to do at this point in time. So we'll just X out of that, and then you'll see it pop up here. So to go into the properties of it, you just double click on it, and that'll bring up the schedules property interface. As you can see, is loaded up there now. So some of these tabs I do use, some of them I don't use. So in effect, you can call it any name you want. So it's probably best you come up with some sort of naming convention that's logical. I do mine quite stringently. So when I go and search on schedules and the like to bring into various other conditions and triggers and the like, they're easier to find. So the naming conventions so on the rules tab, now the only rule I use is only select trains in start block. So what that means is, just as it sounds, that it's only going to start a schedule if there's a train in the start block. And also we will click trains may stay in start block. So what that actually is, if the schedule starts and the train physically can't move due to a red signal or otherwise, it'll just sit there until it's ready to go. Now the trains tab, each individual schedule I run, the ones we're defining here today anyway, only one train can actually use that given schedule. So for another video I will go into how I did my groups, vehicles and descriptions. So what I mean by groups is you group like types of vehicles together. So what we'll do, we'll scroll down. So these are railcar ones. So this is going to be the one for railcar 1. So as I said, I'll show you how to define these up and put all the cars and all that in a later video. And at this point in time, that's all we need on that. So we'll just go back to the general tab quickly. What I'll do, I'll go into one of my schedules that I've actually made up, and I'll step through the process regarding the start and finish operations within the schedule. So we'll just OK out of that. The railcar ones, so we're going to go railcar. So this is the one we looked at doing, railcar out. So the railcar starts from here, out, and finishes over here. So to bring the properties up on that, we double click. So as you can see, we've got the name across the top there for this particular railcar service. Now, we've already gone through rules in the last sort of little excerpt just before. So what I'll do, we'll go to these operations tab where it starts getting quite interesting. Now, all operations start within the schedule are macros to start up to turn the sound locomotives on. So at the end of my schedules, when the locomotive finishes its run and it goes into, say, the turntable on my freight services, all the sound will turn off for obvious reasons. So when the schedule starts, I should say, the first thing it'll do is it'll turn all the sound back on and the lights and the like. So now the finish operations is quite interesting. So I'll just click on that and I'll show you what it actually entails. So this is the finish operation for railcar 1 out, which is in that direction. So when the train gets to this location and the schedule finishes at the Lower Mitcham number 7 West 1 track here, what it will do, it'll finish, it'll go through all these sequences here, it'll get the prerequisite if the repeat railcar number 1 switch is on in the central control panel. It'll then turn the button on for the return schedule. So what it'll do, it'll stop here, go through its sequence, and then it'll stop. It'll go its next schedule, which goes over the top here, and then stops. So that'll keep toggling through itself until we physically stop the schedule. So that's how we got around to sequence schedules together. I know there is a sequence tab that you can do it, but we wanted it to be a little bit more finite about it, that we wanted to add various elements that dictated whether we wanted sequences to occur effectively. Okay, we've already gone through the rest of these tabs, so I won't do that actually now here. So the next probably logical question is, how do I start these or add these schedules to some sort of button to start them? So as I explained just before regarding this central control panel, this is how we control the railway from a dispatch point of view. So you'll see, we'll stay with railcar number 1. So at this point, we're going to click into the extended accessory, which is this switch. So this one is start railcar 1 out. So as you can see, this is the out schedule. So with the connection side of things, what you need to do is each icon or object needs to have what they call this base address, and it needs to be different from every other one. So what that actually does is, so when it's clicked, it can act independently. So you don't want various addresses of 245 on any of your other switchboards, because it just creates a whole lot of issues. Now, how do I keep track of all that, you might ask? So what we ended up doing is, I'll just quickly go back to the Western and Northern Divisions switchboard. So I've got this little interface just here, so search for next free. So that's just a little visual indicator what I can actually do. I can just literally just toggle through. So if I was to add another extended accessory, I'd use number 315. After that, 316, and so on and so on. So with that little system, I now cannot make an error regarding the addressing of it. So I'll go back to the central control panel, and I'll open that extended accessory back up. Alright, so we've got our unique address. So how do we get into the properties? So we go into there and open it up at that point with the properties button. Before we dive into the actual ins and outs and defining all the operations and triggers and all that within the extended accessory, some people have actually asked me why we're using extended accessories and not just a normal switch, because it's obviously a little more complicated how it's set up. Now, the reason why we use them is because we needed something that can be clicked that has triggers and operations. So I'll just run through the various other elements that can be used, but their limitations and what we needed. So obviously a signal element can be clicked and has triggers, but has no operations. The switches, as we talked about, can be clicked and have operations, but they do not have triggers. The flagmen have triggers and operations, but can't be clicked. We needed to use two objects, and it was less complicated and easier to understand with putting it with extended accessory. I'll explain just a little more detail how these sort of work. So each train has two start buttons. So the left is for the out and the right pointing is for the return. Only one schedule is controlled by each button, unless the train has the option to be controlled manually. So these trains don't have the option to be controlled manually. I'll explain these surfaces down here that can be controlled either automatically or manually later. Each start button is green when it is off, so they're currently off when they're in this state, green. But a train can be started. So at that point, if it's green, no train is running, but at that point we can start the schedule. Each button is red when it is on, so it'll be that state there, so it'll go a distinct red color. And that indicates obviously that the schedule and the train is running. Either on the out or the return buttons can be on at any given time, but they can't both be on. That's just the way we've set it up. We can't have two opposing trains. The way we've done that is we only have one train that can actually run on a given schedule at that point in time. So each start button has an on operation. So this is what we're looking at here, the on operation. The off state is empty. The reason why we've done that is because we use other buttons to cancel off our schedule. So that's these ones here that I brought up before. So the operations is, so when it goes red, it turns it on. It's got a prerequisite to make sure that it's not already on, and I'll explain in a sec the reason why we have done it this way. And if there's, for whatever reason, it can't start, it'll turn the button back off. We'll go to the triggers tab and the on state. So what that actually means is, so when it's in the on state, which is that one, it triggers the schedule to start again. So each button has its triggers that turn it on when the schedule is running and off when it is not. So that's the method behind that. So the next tab we looked at was the conditions. So each button has conditions that it can only be turned on if it's currently off, and only off if the schedule is not running, both of which will prevent it from a false indication. So that's the errors we're getting with just simple buttons and the way we wanted to run this. So the on operation of every button has an extra test that if the schedule could not be started for whatever reason, the button is turned off to show no schedule is running. So the reason why we did this, the test was really necessary because the click that attempts to start the schedule turns the button on, and there was no other way of turning it back off at that point in time. So that created all sorts of issues for us. So this is the way we've designed that. So it is a little bit complicated. If you want me to go into it a little bit more detail for it, put some comments below. It's obviously quite difficult to explain in a video format. I've got some documentation on it that I can send people if they're interested. So in short, that's how we use what we call EA, or extended accessories. At this point in time, that's probably all we need to go through on the advanced scheduling. So as you can see, it can be quite an involved process, but once you sort of learn the basics of it, you can whip through these pretty quick. Now, as I said in future videos, I'll explain my shunted freight service, because that's probably be a few videos if people are interested, how we interact and how that runs. So the process regarding what we've just talked about today is relevant for railcar services, the community service, and the express, because these at this point in time are all my automatic schedules. So that is transverse, run out through the layout, create traffic, create a lot of mayhem, and whilst I'm running my operations with all these schedules down here. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time. Okay guys, rather long video that time around. We had a lot to get through to describe how I use the extended accessories in my advanced schedules and the like. So if you want to be advised of any upcoming videos that I might have, make sure you subscribe, click the little bell icon so you can be advised of upcoming videos, like us on Facebook, and please remember to go and have a look at my new website at www.modelrailroadtechniques.com. And see you next time.